Hey, folks, welcome to Common Sense with Curtis Scott, and I'm here today with Lindy Beaty for Ellis County and District Attorney. Lindy, if you could go ahead and just introduce yourself, who you are, your history, everything about you, and why you're running for the office, stuff like that. If you could go ahead
Okay,
and start off there for me.
sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Lindy Beaty. I'm originally from San Antonio. That's home. I went to high school there. I graduated from college at St. Mary's University there. Then I went on to law school at the University of Houston. I graduated there. And when I came back, I started my prosecution career at the Ellis County Attorney's Office. And Atascosa County is a tiny county south of San Antonio. So there I did misdemeanor prosecution, juvenile prosecution, and a little bit of commissioner's court, giving them advice, things like that. I stayed there for about 3.5 years, and I was making a whopping $29,000 doing that. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it and would have never left but for the pay. I had a lot of student loans that needed to be paid. So I needed to make a little bit more money. So I told my boss that I was going to be leaving and looking for something else. He completely understood. In fact, he wrote me a letter of recommendation to take with me. I saw an opening at the Ellis County and District Attorney's Office for a juvenile prosecutor. So I came here in 2004, moved to Waxahachie, and became the juvenile prosecutor. So I did that for about 10 months. And then I moved up to be a felony prosecutor. From there, I handled lower level felonies like state jails and some third degrees. And then after about maybe 6 months of that, I became the child sex crime prosecutor. So I did that for about 4 years, from about 2006 to about 2010. That's all I did. And had many, many trials doing those cases, because those are the cases that do go to trial. Was pretty successful in those cases, got many life sentences on child predators. After that, I went back to do general felonies, and everybody kind of had to do everything at that point because we were getting a little bit too big, and there were too many cases coming in for just one person to handle. So we kind of did general casework. So I would have anything from murders to drug cases, child sex crimes still, DWIs, things like that. Did that until 2014. Then I became the chief misdemeanor prosecutor. Did that for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. Then I came back as the chief felony prosecutor. And then when the courts split, when we had Judge Ermatinger and Judge Carroll, I became the chief felony prosecutor in Judge Carroll's court until I left in 2019. I left with my now law partner, Ricky Sipes, who is the chief felony prosecutor in the 443rd District Court in Ermatinger's court. So we left together. We opened up our own law firm. We do criminal defense now. That's pretty much all that I do. And so we've been doing that since December of 2019. So I've got a lot of experience in prosecution. In fact, a little over 18.5 years just doing criminal prosecution kind of at every level. I left in 2019 because people ask me like, well, why'd you leave? I absolutely loved prosecution. I have a passion for it. But at the same time, both me and my law partner, we had kids who were the same age, at that time, about 9 years old. And, the job at the DA's office is very demanding. It's a lot of nights. It's a lot of weekends working for trial preparation, things like that. We were missing out on some family time. And that's time we're never going to get back with our kids. So we made the decision to go ahead and make the switch in 2019. And we're doing probably as much work or working harder than we were before. It's just we have flexibility of time. I can leave early on a Friday or go on a school field trip if I want to, and I'll just make up the time on a weekend or stay late or come early. It's sort of flexibility of time has been really nice. So we've enjoyed that. I wasn't sure I would enjoy doing criminal defense work, to be honest. I had done prosecution for so long, I wasn't sure that I would be good at it, honestly, and that I would enjoy it. However, I have really enjoyed having the different perspective of handling cases on the other side. You just see things a little bit differently, right? What I tell people a lot of the times is that when I was a prosecutor, I really only could see defendants as files because I had like 400 of them, right? I didn't have time to really learn about why they were in the criminal justice system to begin with. How did they get here? You know, what brought them to make the decisions they were making? And so now on the defense side, you get a little bit more into the background and lives of people as to why they're there. You know, generally, I think people fall into two categories that are in the criminal justice system. One, it's good people making stupid decisions. And that's a lot of it. I think it's a lot of the majority of people are there. And then the second group is you have just inherently, I believe, bad people doing bad things, you know, without care about consequences or other people or property. Those are not as many, but when you get those people, it's really bad, you know. But I have enjoyed doing that. You know, we make sure we stand up for people's constitutional rights, which is very important. So you do get that other perspective there to see. And sometimes things are done wrong. You know, I don't believe it's intentional necessarily, but stuff happens. And so that experience has been really great for us. And I do value that experience.
Okay. So I'm hearing from you, you got 18 and a half around here in this area. Did you said a little bit prior to that though also?
So I had 15 of it here and then 3.5 at the other county.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
trying to do the math here. I'm
Mhm.
not a mathematician, as you can tell. So you got quite a bit of experience, and then you, like you just said, you have some experience now seeing the other side. So you kind of, you think that'll help you?
Yeah, for sure. Because I think, you know, the constitutional duty of the DA or the prosecuting attorney is to seek justice. I mean, that is enumerated in the Texas Constitution. That is our legal duty, is to seek justice, right? And so it doesn't say justice for who. It doesn't say justice just for victims, just for defendants. It just says justice. And so that has to take into account everything, right? If you're not being fair about the prosecution, if you're not making sure people's constitutional rights aren't being violated, then you're not doing a good job and you're not doing justice. So there's an inherent duty on the DA to be above board all the time. I say on the defense side, we don't necessarily have that because our job description is different. You know, the job description on the defense is to zealously represent our clients. So it's vastly different. So I think it's important to have that perspective to be able to make sure that you are actually seeking the truth and doing the right things for the right reasons all the time.
Amen. Okay. Well, I'm going to move on to the next question here. You kind of, that was your introduction and everything. We're going to ask here, why are you running for Ellis County and District Attorney? What's the real, if you could put like just I'm not saying a couple sentences, but what's the real heartfelt reason behind why you're running?
Right. So essentially, my reasoning is because I don't feel that things are being done efficiently and effectively in the current system. All right. I feel because I was here for so long that I had a hand in how things were going at one point. And I've been disappointed in how things are going now. Some of that is because I believe some of the cases were taking a very long time to go through the system. Okay. And what I mean by that is if someone got arrested today, sometimes it would be a year and a half before those cases were ever filed. During that time frame, some people are in jail sitting and waiting. Other people are out on bond, and we don't know what they're doing necessarily. There's no immediate consequence or a consequence close enough to the actual act that I think needs to happen to have some effect to your punishment. Right? It's kind of like if I tell my kid, you know, I'm punishing him today for something that happened 2 weeks ago, that doesn't really work. And it's kind of the same with people who commit crimes. You got to have a more immediate punishment, so to speak. And so I think that process needs to be a little bit faster because it's not fair to anybody. If you're waiting a long time to get a case filed, that's a disservice to the victim of the case because they're wondering like what's going on with my case. It's a disservice to the defendants. Now, there's lots of defendants who know they did wrong, who said, let me get my punishment and let me do my time and go on with my life. They're in a waiting pattern too. They can't do anything about it either, just sort of holding there. So that's one of the main reasons. The second reason is because I think a lot of that inefficiency is due to the high turnover rate at the DA's office. Just in the last 3 years, there's been 45 people who have left the district attorney's office. The current staff number is 55. So you're talking about close to 90% of the people have left. You cannot run any business or any organization efficiently when you have that higher turnover rate, because you're constantly just training people. No one is ever fully trained at that point. It takes 6 to 9 months to fully train a person to do their job. And when you just have turnover at every level, clerks, investigators, attorneys, that causes great inefficiency in the system as well. That inefficiency leads to a waste of taxpayer dollars, because you're wasting the time and money to train somebody who then leaves to go somewhere else. And then you're having to bring somebody else in. Those cases are taking longer to go through the system. So you're paying court-appointed attorneys more money the longer a case goes through. Everything just costs more money. People who are in jail are sitting in jail longer because of the inefficiency as well. The sheriff has said numerous times that his jail is full. He has, on average now, I guess, around 500 people in the jail. That's, for our county, that's a large number. And the reason that's important is because we as taxpayers pay $92 a day to keep those people at the jail. And that does not include inmate medical costs, which taxpayers are also responsible for. So if an inmate stubs a toe and they have to go to the doctor, not only does a deputy have to go with him or a jailer have to go with him, the county is picking up the tab for that. And so we've got some folks over at the jail that have serious medical issues. They're going to dialysis 2 or 3 times a week. They're doing cardiac rehab 2 or 3 times a week. They're having major surgeries. They're having dental work done. And the inmate medical costs has skyrocketed. In 2023, the budgeted amount for inmate medical was $2.5 million. The budget that just got approved in October for the 2024 year is $5 million.
That's that's just for medical expenses?
That is just for inmate medical expenses.
Wow, that is
So it's insane. We cannot afford, we literally cannot afford to keep those people in the jail. I'm not talking about releasing them and just saying good luck. I'm talking about moving those cases faster, getting the defense attorneys their discovery and their evidence faster, getting them the offers faster to figure out, are we going to resolve this case or is it going to be a trial? Figure it out sooner, get those people where they need to go. If it's prison, let's get them there. If it's probation, let's get them there. But get them out of our jail and doing something else instead of wasting all of our money.
Awesome. All right. Well, you've answered actually some of my questions that I had, but we're going to just review them just so we answer the questions. But you kind of explained a little bit already about the role of the Ellis County District Attorney. But if you could put it in a real small nutshell, what is the real role? And what would you be doing as district attorney or Ellis County attorney?
Yeah, so it's twofold. So it's a county attorney's office. So that means that you are responsible for giving elected officials legal advice, right? So any of the county officials can come to the county and district attorney to get that legal advice. They advise commissioners' courts, they review contracts for the county. They're essentially the in-house legal team for the commissioners and the county, right? To keep the county out of lawsuits, things like that. And then the other part that is the bigger part is the district attorney part, which is the prosecution of all levels of cases, whether that's misdemeanors, whether that's juvenile cases, whether that's felony cases. And that task cannot be given to anybody else. So the county can, and they have gone to outside counsel, other law firms to get some legal work done. They can't go outside to get any of the criminal prosecution done. It has to be done there at the county and district attorney's office. The office is also responsible for CPS cases that come through the system. So there's a team of attorneys that do a lot of different work that are there, but it's the ultimate responsibility of the DA to make sure that the criminal prosecution goes through properly.
Okay. I've got some law enforcement background, so I know a little bit, but I
Mhm.
didn't know some of the details that you just told me. So that's why I really wanted to get that answer out to everyone,
Mhm.
because a lot of our citizens, and that's why we do this at Common Sense with Curtis
Mhm.
Scott, that our nation was founded on common sense, but a lot
Yes.
of people don't know everything and how our systems work because they've gotten so big, and especially as
Sure.
our county grows. So you kind of said something about this before, but if you could just one thing, what would be your number one priority as Ellis County District and District Attorney?
Uh, Efficiency.
Efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. People mistake efficiency for ineffectiveness, and they just make assumptions that being efficient means that you're just going to put a slap on the wrist, for people that have done bad things. That's not what it means at all. You can absolutely do this job effectively, being still tough on crime, because that is what we are known for, and we don't want to go backwards on
Yeah.
that. But also doing it efficiently. You've got to put people in the right positions at the office to make sure that that happens, and then you have to let them do their jobs. There's very good attorneys that work there right now. You just got to let them do their job.
Okay. Awesome. So you already kind of answered this question, but how many people actually work? And if you could just maybe explain a little bit, how many people work for the Ellis County DA and the DA's office? But like, if you could just give a little breakdown, kind of, if you know the numbers and stuff like that.
So there's currently, I believe, 55 total employees there. I believe there's 25 attorneys that are supposed to be there. I say supposed to because in misdemeanor, there's currently only 3 prosecutors right now. There should be 6. Then on the felony, I believe there's about 7 or 8. You have a first assistant. You have a CPS attorney. You have a juvenile attorney. You have 2 civil attorneys. You have an appellate attorney. Let's see, who am I missing? I feel like I'm missing somebody. But there's about 25 attorneys. Most of those attorneys will have clerks. So there's close to 25 clerks as well. And then the rest are investigators. So about maybe 7 investigators at the office.
Okay. So yeah, like I said, I don't even know any of that stuff. I
Mhm.
know with my law enforcement background, we just know that there's prosecutors and everything like that. And
Yeah.
but as DA, you would be over all of them, correct?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. And so you kind of answered this a little bit. You spoke about it. So the next question is approximately how many felonies and misdemeanors does the DA handle in a year? And my next question after that's going to be how many go to trial? I mean, so you can wrap that all up into one there.
Yeah. So in terms of felonies, you're looking I'm going to say in the past like 5 years, you're looking at about 1,200 or more felonies that go through the system. Misdemeanors, you're looking anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 that go through the system. In any prosecution office, I'm talking about anywhere. Anywhere between 95 to 97% of those cases are going to resolve in a plea. And again, people think plea is a 4-letter word. They hate it. But plea, again, doesn't mean people are just getting probation. People plea to 40 years in prison, 50 years in prison, 20 years, depending on the crime. And the reason that plea bargains have to happen is it is physically impossible to try every case. Again, if we're talking about 2,000 misdemeanor cases a year at least, it takes a half day to pick a jury, maybe 1 full day to pick to have the trial. That's, we're already at 4,000 days that we need to do the 2,000, misdemeanors that we currently have. So it's a physical impossibility. So there has to be plea bargaining. And where we get the offers for a plea bargain, because people say, well, how do you know what to offer somebody? What a plea bargain is you tell a defendant, if you agree to plead guilty and admit that you committed this crime, we will offer you this certain punishment, whatever it is. It could be probation, it could be jail time, it could be prison time. And in exchange, they agree to waive their right to appeal. So it's a done deal at that point. That case isn't coming back for any reason for the most part. And so we get those numbers based on jury trials that we've had of similar cases. Every case is different. You have to judge it based on its own merit, but there's similarities in types of cases, right? We know for the most part that if you take a child sex case to trial and you get a conviction, you're going to get a hefty sentence, right? Rightly so. That's what should happen, right? But then there's also been cases where those types of cases have been taken to trial and there's been not guilties, or it's been taken to trial and they've gotten the lower end of the sentence. So you have to have the experience enough to kind of know what case is worth what, right? And sort of value it that way. So then you offer a plea bargain for a little less. So if I think that this DWI third, I think if we went to trial, I think if a jury convicted this person, they might get 8 years in prison. So and the defense attorney knows that too, right? Because they've done it enough too. So then the DA offers, we'll give you 6, right? So then the defendant has to decide, is it worth it for me to take it to trial? If I lose, I could get 10. They're offering me 6 for sure. So they have to decide if they're going to take it or if it's worth going to trial. If you offer a defendant what they think they're going to get at trial, it's going to be a trial because they might as well roll the dice because sometimes they'll get a not guilty. We've all had the instance where we went to trial thinking we were going to get a guilty and we got a not guilty, or vice versa. We had defense attorneys think I'm going to get a not guilty, and then they got the maximum sentence. They got a conviction and maximum. So sometimes it is a roll of the dice. Every jury is different. Our jury pool is a lot different now than it was when I got here, 18 years ago or 20 years ago. It just is. And so those are things that have to be taken into consideration when doing plea bargain agreements.
Okay. So, speaking of charges, pleas, stuff like that, I know in other counties they've started to where they don't even take certain types of charges. Mm-hmm. Is that something you would ever support?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So the short answer on that is no. The second reason for that too is that the legislature recently passed a law that says a DA cannot do that. And that was in response to places like Houston, which screws everything up, and Dallas, which screws everything up, right? Because, in Dallas, when John Creuzot took office, he said, you know what, we're not going to prosecute low-level thefts, that are under like $750 if it's for personal use. What does that mean? That could be anything. And it's a shame because I don't want my stuff stolen that I worked hard for and just you're giving it away, right? You're just essentially telling people it's okay to steal. And that's wrong, so there's a law against that. And secondly, it's just not the right thing to do. If there is a law on the books and if it's properly investigated by a law enforcement agency, we're going to prosecute those cases. That still allows us for discretion because just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. So each case can have its own discretion based on, certain factors or something. But for the most part, you have to take those cases. It's frustrating for law enforcement to put in the work, to put in the effort, and then, we're just, going to throw it out the window. Sorry.
Yeah. I've been in Dallas County. I worked Irving PD for 8 years, and we had some cases that judges literally just dropped that we couldn't believe it. I won't go on too much about that. That's some past years, but yes. Dallas County definitely, like you said, it was screwed up. And I don't want that here in Ellis County. And that's one of my big questions. And I think when I talk to citizens out in the community, that's a lot of their concerns is they don't want Dallas County coming to Ellis County.
That is absolutely correct. So, when I was prosecuting here, we did have this sign in our office because we like nothing better than for attorneys that were coming down from Dallas to say, oh, can I get time served here? Can you drop this felony to a misdemeanor? And we would say, no. And they said, why? And we would say, look at the sign. You are not in Dallas. You are in Ellis County. If you want Dallas results, go back to Dallas or tell your clients to commit their crimes in Dallas, right? That's why a lot of people moved here. It's one of the reasons I moved here. I'm from, the big city of San Antonio, but I like small town living. I've moved my mom here from San Antonio because I believe this county was a lot safer for her the older she got. My in-laws, I've moved them here as well because I think this is a safer place. But make no mistake about it, we are growing. We are not a tiny county. In terms of population, there's 254 counties in Texas. Ellis County is about number 25. So we are a top 10%, county in terms of population. and our population just keeps increasing and increasing, and slowly Dallas is moving south. So we have to make sure that we keep Ellis, and make sure that we are tough on crime so that people don't want to come here to do bad things. You know, there's been more homicides here in the last few years than there ever was for the last 10 years. So we're getting big city crime down here. And so it's important that we take those cases seriously, that we make sure people understand and respect. It's not out of fear necessarily that they have to be here, but it's out of respect, that say, oh, I don't want to commit my crimes in Ellis because I know, they're going to come down hard on me. That's the way it should be.
Yes, yeah. And it does work. I know in my days in Irving that we were one of the cities in Dallas County that people didn't come to because sad to say, but we'd throw the book at them. I mean, because we didn't want them in our city, and it made a difference. We'd pull people over and they'd be like, they told us not to come to Irving.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad that it's that way, but that's just a matter of fact. And people that are in the criminal world, that stuff spreads, especially with social media. So
absolutely, yeah. They know.
I'm pro keeping Ellis County.
Yes.
So the next question is going to be about voter fraud. So in light of today's world, we've been having all sorts of voter fraud found around Texas. Our attorney general can no longer, according to the Supreme Court of Texas, can no longer push these charges. So that's where I would ask, would you take and actually pursue these cases? If you heard of anything, would you actually really pursue after this?
Yes. So, there's nothing really more important than a free and fair election. And so to do that, you have to be sure that your elections are being done correctly. I think Ellis County does a pretty good job in terms of monitoring that, because honestly, a lot of the election workers and things are Republicans. So, I mean, they're going to make sure that things are done correctly. Having said that, I'm sure voter fraud has happened here, right? I think it happens everywhere. It's been happening since the beginning of elections, hundreds of years ago. So don't say it's not happening. It does. We did, when I was at the DA's office, we did have one, and it wasn't really voter fraud. It was someone that had a felony on their record was able to go and vote or tried to go and vote. And so we did take that seriously. And prosecuted that case because we had proof that she knew that she could not vote because they are given, she was on probation, and she's given a sheet from probation that says specifically, you cannot have guns, you cannot vote, you cannot do these things. So we could show that she had copies of that and she knew that she wasn't supposed to because she was trying to make it like it was an accident. And we're like, no, you knew. So yeah, we definitely will pursue any of voter fraud. Again, everything needs to be thoroughly investigated, and if it is, and law enforcement does their job, then yeah, we'll absolutely take those cases.
Awesome, yeah. Well, that's good to hear, because definitely in light of the world we're living in now in our countries, we've seen more than we've ever seen. So that's what I asked that question. I like to do up-to-date topics here. So I've got two more questions for you before we wrap it up.
Sure.
And I guess the next one's going to be about Veterans Court. Mm-hmm. So would you promote and grow the Veterans Court? And then after that, I'm going to ask about intellectual disabilities things. So,
sure. So currently, we do have a Veterans Court in place. It's my understanding that we've only had one person that has been able to go through it. And that person actually went through the Tarrant County system. They didn't go through the Ellis County system. So that's been a little bit of a disappointment in that we have this, but why aren't we using it? So we need to use it, right? So you can't tell me that there's not veterans sitting in this jail right now that would qualify for the Veterans Court. So, I even have a client right now who I think would benefit from it. I've reached out to the district attorney's office to say, hey, what are the parameters to get somebody in this court? What do they need to do? And I haven't gotten a response, and that's been over a week ago. So I don't know what's going on with that court. The last I heard, they needed to have a court coordinator before that could get started. But again, I believe that was in the budget from October. So I don't know why that's not happening. But yes, I think it's important that if we're going to do these specialty courts, that we need to hit the ground running and get people in, right? I mean, otherwise we're not going to know, because we need to have some statistics as to whether or not these specialty courts are actually working. Are they beneficial? Are they cost effective? Things like that. And right now we just don't have any data to show anything. I mean, so I don't even know what the program is. I couldn't tell you. It hasn't been explained really to any of the defense attorneys, en masse. There might be one or two that maybe had a hand in trying to bring it here that might know a little bit about it, but the rest of us haven't been clued in on it, and we're trying to get information about it. So yes, I would definitely promote and grow that veterans court, but let's get it done. Let's do it.
Yes, and I don't even know exactly how all it works either. I've just heard a whole lot about the veterans court and stuff, and I've got a lot of connections being a veteran, a Marine here. But also, I just talked to somebody in the community. They deal a lot with people with intellectual disabilities. And one of the things there that I know from being in law enforcement, there are certain statutes, parts of the law that say knowingly, things like that. And that's where we run into issues. But could you explain and what can we do? Is there any court stuff we can do to help people with intellectual disabilities?
So there can also be a mental health court that a county can have to sort of help people who have some sort of mental illness, right? It can't be, again, for violent offenders, things like that, to sort of help them through. The biggest issue that we have, and sort of the biggest issue I believe that there is currently mental health. I would say, and it's just anecdotal evidence, I don't have statistics, but just on my experience on this end of things, probably 80% of my clients have something, some sort of mental illness. But a lot of the times that mental illness doesn't negate what they did, right? And it doesn't necessarily make a difference to a victim. So if you have been a victim if someone stabbed you, you're not going to feel better because the person that stabbed you has an intellectual disability, right? You're still a victim. So we have to be mindful of that. At the same time, we have to understand what the range of punishment is for whatever crime that is. And if we send people to prison, which we can do, it gets them out of society for a little bit, but they're going to come back. And then what? They're still sort of in the same kind of boat that they were. So we're kind of lacking in terms of mental health resources. However, there's been what I am completely in favor of is trying to restore people's competency faster. So there's a difference between incompetency and insanity. So if you are incompetent, it's sort of a day-to-day situation. So you could be completely competent today and incompetent tomorrow. And incompetency is essentially that you don't know what's going on. You don't know what the judge's role is. You don't know what your attorney's role is. You don't know what the prosecution's role is, and you can't assist your attorney in your defense. That's incompetency. If that happens, you essentially go off to a mental health hospital to restore your competency. And then once a psychiatrist says, okay, we've restored this person's competency, they know what's going on now, they can come back and go on in the criminal justice system. If someone is insane, that means they are not guilty because at the time they committed the offense, they essentially did not understand that what they were doing was wrong. They couldn't appreciate the difference between right and wrong. That's insanity. If someone's insane, you're found not guilty, you then go off to a mental health hospital, but you can stay there for the duration essentially of whatever your sentence was. So it's kind of two different things. In terms of mental health, people are on this wheel. They come get mental health treatment, they get on their medication, and they're great. And then they get set loose and they can't afford their medication when they're out in the free world. They stop taking it and then they're right back in. The problem that we're having with incompetency is the beds are full. I have a client who's been in jail for over a year now. She's completely incompetent and she's still waiting for a bed. So she's just sitting at the jail. Again, our jail is not a mental health hospital, but she is sitting there waiting for her turn to go get her competency restored. So she's just sitting there. Again, we're paying for that. I believe it's the North Texas Behavioral Authority. They have a program to where they can actually come into the jails to try to restore somebody's competency. So we're not having to wait a year, 18 months. We can get that done sooner to sort of move that case back on the track. So I'd be totally in favor of that. In terms of a mental health court, that's not my first priority right now because I need to move the cases, the backlog through the system. Once that happens, I'm happy to explore different types of courts if it will benefit, if we can get a lot of people in those programs and get them moved. The issue with those courts sometimes is you can't get enough people in them. So, there's Montgomery County, which is out by Houston. They have a population of, I think, 500,000. It might be 1 million by now, or maybe it's Fort Bend County, one county by Houston. They have a mental health court, but there's only 15 people in it at any one given time. Well, I can give you 50 people that need to go in that court right now. So how do we pick and choose who gets in, who doesn't? Is it fair to have some people in and other people, they may qualify, but now we don't have room for you. So you get the other track and you just go to prison. So there's a lot of things to consider, but I think mental health is one of the biggest issues facing the criminal justice system right now. So I'm in favor of any agencies that are willing to help us sort of bridge that gap and help us move the cases through in a more efficient way that benefits everybody, victim and defendant.
Yes, and that's why I kind of brought that up along with asking about Veterans Court, because a lot of our veterans actually deal with things like PTSD, and
yes,
that's why. I mean, we've seen it firsthand being in law enforcement. I started back in '98, and really, honestly, I mean, everybody that commits a crime, they're having a mental health crisis.
Right.
And I'm not trying to knock it, but it's just the matter of fact you're not in your right mind a lot of time doing this stuff.
Right, because who does
that? Like you said, but you got to face the consequences, and sometimes it's jail that helps people out. So,
yeah, it does. It drives, because you also have a lot of mental health with drug addiction. So those two things together, form a bigger problem, and so if you fix one thing, are you creating another problem? So, it's got to have a multi-directional attack on a situation.
Yeah, I agree 100% there. So my last question, and it's very important to me because you kind of mentioned a little bit about the Constitution earlier, and I was really glad to hear you talk about the Texas Constitution. But what is your take on the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and what is its importance for the Ellis County and District Attorney?
Like I said, you cannot have justice without adhering to the Constitution, right? And I will tell you, and I've been telling people, sometimes the Constitution sucks. And I say that because it doesn't always give us the answer we want or the result that we want, right? But we have to make sure that whether you are being accused of a Class C simple assault or a capital murder, that we make sure that everybody's constitutional rights are not violated, whether that is their right to have a speedy trial, whether that is their right to be able to subpoena their witnesses, their Fifth Amendment rights to remain silent. We have to make sure that those rights are not violated. And if they are, I think it's the duty of the county and district attorney to bring that up. Right. I don't think we get to hide the ball and say maybe the defense attorney will be dumb and won't recognize that there was an illegal search and seizure or something like that. Right. Maybe that's not how we should do things. It should be incumbent upon the DA to take the affirmative steps to correct that situation. If the case can go forward without whatever that evidence is, by all means, let's figure out a way to do it. But if we can't, we have to be strong enough to say we cannot take this case forward because something was done that violated somebody's constitutional rights. I mean, that's how important I think, it is. And every one of the amendments is important. I think, the right to bear arms. I'm hugely in favor of that and people's ability to protect themselves, protect their families. So I think it's important when you're looking at potential self-defense claims on some of these cases. It's really important to look at that to make sure, again, that people's constitutional rights are not violated and that they had an actual opportunity to exercise that right. If you come into my house, I'm going to shoot you. That's just kind of how it is. And I better not get charged for it if you're coming into my house and doing something to me or my family. So I think that's important. The Texas Constitution does follow along with a lot of the constitutional amendments in terms of illegal searches, seizures, due process of law. That's very important. So it's an affirmative duty, I believe, on the county and district attorney to bring up any issues that we see in a case. We're going to get it first, right? Law enforcement has it. We get it first before the defense attorneys ever get a crack at it. And so we have to be proactive in doing that and not be afraid to do it because we're scared, well, what will the public think if we, do this? I'm not afraid to say, look, we're not doing this and this is why. I think people need to understand the why and be told the why that something is happening or not happening. But I'm not going to go against the Constitution because it doesn't give me the result that I want to have.
Yes, well, that's awesome to hear. I really think our nation here in the recent years, people have really turned back to the Constitution a lot more. Mm-hmm. I think there was a time where we've kind of fallen away from people really following along with it. And the Texas Constitution, especially, I don't know how many people I've talked to that have no clue, even within law enforcement, that have no clue about the Texas Constitution and that we have a Bill of Rights as Texans.
And it's important that people understand what their rights are, and I hear so many times that people got off on a technicality. The Constitution for me is not a technicality. It's just not. And so, people need to be a little bit more aware of their constitutional rights, especially not necessarily on a local level for sure, but on a national level. To see some of the things that are going wrong are not in keeping with the Constitution. They just aren't,
And that's one of the things why I ask even about voter fraud, stuff like that, because it's all on the state level. And then they've recently, I don't want to go a whole lot into that, but I'll give you one final shot here. I've asked you all the questions I want to ask. If there's anything else you want to say to the voters or to the citizens out there, now's your time if you have any word.
Right. Yes, so I would appreciate everybody's vote. Early voting starts February 20th. I have the experience. I have a track record of being tough on crime. You can look at the cases I've prosecuted. People have gotten life sentences for aggravated robbery, sex assault. I'm not, lenient in any way, but I am absolutely fair because I want to make sure at the end of the day, when the defendant is sitting in prison, he understands that he got a fair trial, and that's what should happen. I have experience at all levels of criminal prosecution, from misdemeanors to felonies to juveniles. I've had experience on the defense end. I also know what it's like to be a victim. My own father was murdered in San Antonio in 2009. It took 3 years for that case to go through the system in Bexar County. So I know what it's like to have to wait for justice. It's a traumatizing thing for a family to go through. And so you take those experiences, with you. I'm not the same person I was and the same prosecutor I was before that event. I'm also not the same prosecutor person I was before I got married, before I had kids. All of those life experiences, I believe, make me better suited to be able to head the county and district attorney's office. It's very important to me that we are able to hire quality people that understand and have the same philosophy about prosecution, and that we are able to keep those people and retain those people. That's where the efficiency lies, in being able to keep and maintain the people who are going to do a good job. I believe I can do that. I don't believe in leading by, fear or authority. I believe in leading by motivation and influence and mentorship. That's what needs to happen. People need to feel comfortable that they can come, whether it's to me or to anybody else, to get good service, because we are a public servant. I am applying for the job of a public servant, and that's for everybody, and that includes the people that work at the district attorney's office. I am their public servant as well. So I am not afraid to be a working DA, to get back in there. Now, I know I can't be in court every day because there's administrative work to be done, but I can still look at cases, screen cases, go to court, try a case if I need to help out, to get things moving. And I'm not afraid to do that, and that's going to happen starting on day one.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. I really do appreciate it. And I really just I'm doing this with all the candidates. So anybody that's listening today, if you can join us next week, we'll have Ann Montgomery on also. And I really just ask that anybody that watches these, pick the best candidate that's going to serve your community, because it is about serving we the people.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have anything else, I'll call it a day.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
You too. Thank you.